Vision of the Future, Chapter 1. The Imperial Star Destroyer Chimera slid through the black of space, its only companion the silent gas giant world of Pesiton far below. Admiral Pelion was standing at the forward viewport, gazing out at the dead planet, when Captain Ardif arrived on the bridge. "Report from Major Harch, Admiral," he said briskly. "All damage from that pirate attack has been repaired. Your ship is back to full fighting readiness." "Thank you, Captain," Pelion said carefully, hiding a smile. In the 30 hours since the failed attack on the Chimera, Ardif had gone from believing it to be a raid by New Republic General Garmbella Bliss to suspicions that it had been engineered by dissident Imperial elements, to similar suspicions involving similarly dissident rebels, and was now apparently convinced that a pirate gang was responsible. Of course, in all fairness, Ardif had had the past 30 hours to cogitate on his theories. The tech's preliminary report on the debris from that destroyed Kaloth battlecruiser had certainly influenced his thinking, too. "Anything new from the patrols?" Pelion asked. "Just more negative, sir," Ardif said. "Still no indications of activity anywhere in the system." "Oh, and the sensor stealth assault shuttle you sent on the attacker's escape vector also just checked in. Still no trace." Pelion nodded. "As expected, really. Anyone who could afford to buy and fly a battlecruiser usually knew a few tricks about hiding it." "It was worth a try," he told Ardif. "Have them try one more system. We can transmit that far without relays. If they haven't picked up the trail by then, order them back." "Yes, sir," Ardif murmured. Even without looking, Pelion could sense Ardif's hesitation. "A question, Captain," he prompted. "It's this communications blackout, sir," Ardif said. "I don't like being so completely out of contact this way. It's like being blind and deaf, and frankly, it makes me nervous." "I don't much like it myself," Pelion conceded. "But the only ways to make contact with the outside universe are to either transmit to an Imperial relay station or punch our way onto the holonet. And the minute we do either, everyone from Coruscant to Bastion will know we're here. If that happens, we'll have more than the occasional pirate gang lining up to take potshots at us. And," he added silently, "it will be the end of any chance for a quiet meeting between him and Bella Bliss. Assuming the General was indeed willing to talk." "I understand all that, Admiral," Ardif said. "But has it occurred to you that yesterday's attack might not have been an isolated incident against an isolated Imperial ship?" Pelion cocked an eyebrow. "Are you suggesting it might have been part of a coordinated attack against the Empire?" "Why not?" Ardif said. "I'm willing to concede at this point that it probably wasn't the New Republic who hired them. But why couldn't the pirates have set it up on their own? The Empire has always come down hard on pirate gangs. Maybe a group of them got together and decided the time was right for revenge." Pelion stroked his lip thoughtfully. On the surface, it was a ridiculous suggestion. Even on its deathbed, the Empire was far stronger than any possible aggregate of pirate gangs should hope to defeat. But that didn't mean they wouldn't be foolish enough to try. "That still leaves the question of how they knew we were here," he pointed out. "We still don't know what happened to Colonel Vermal," Ardif reminded him. "Maybe it was this pirate coalition who snatched him. He could have told them about Pesiton." "Not willingly," Pelion said darkly. "If they did what it would take to make him talk, I'll decorate Bastion's moon with their hides." "Yes, sir," Ardif said. "But that brings us back to the question of how long we're going to stay here." Pelion looked out the viewport at the stars. Yes, that was indeed the question. How long should they wait here in the middle of nowhere in the hope that this slow attrition of the Empire could be stopped? That they could end this war with the New Republic with a shred of territory and dignity still intact? That they could finally have peace? "2 weeks," he said. "We'll give Bella Bliss another 2 weeks to respond to our offer." "Even though the message may not have reached him?" "The message reached him," Pelion said firmly. "Vermal is a highly resourceful, highly competent officer. Whatever happened to him, I have no doubt he completed his mission first." "Yes, sir," Ardif said. his tone making it clear that he didn't share Pelian's confidence. And if Bella Bliss doesn't come within that time frame? Pelian pursed his lips. We'll decide then. Ardif hesitated, then took half a step closer to his superior. You really believe this is our best hope, sir, don't you? He said quietly. Pelian shook his head. No, Captain, he murmured. I believe it's our only hope. The wedge of approaching Sinar IPV-4 patrol ships broke in perfect formation to both sides, and the Imperial Star Destroyer Relentless glided smoothly between the reforming clusters towards its designated orbital position. Very impressive, Moff Disra growled to the slim man beside him, hearing his heart pounding in his ears as he gazed across the bridge at the green-blue world framed in the forward viewport. I trust you didn't haul me all the way out here just to watch the Croctarian Home Defense Forces maneuvers. Patience, Your Excellency, Major Groden Tierce said quietly at his side. I told you we had a surprise for you. Disra felt his lip twist. Yes, that's what Tierce had said, and that was all Tierce had said. And as for Flim... Disra shifted his gaze to the Admiral's chair, feeling his lip twist a little more. Their tame con man was sitting there, bold as brickbrass in his blue skin makeup and glowing red eye surface inserts, and his white Grand Admiral's uniform. The absolute laser-trimmed image of Grand Admiral Thrawn, a masquerade solidly believed by every Imperial aboard the Relentless from Captain Dorja on down. Trouble was, there weren't any Imperials on the planet below them. Far from it. Kroktar, merchant center and capital of Shatam sector, was deep in New Republic territory, with every bit as much military firepower as one would expect such a world to have. There was no guarantee that any of them would be impressed by Flim's eyes and uniform and acting ability. And if they weren't, this cozy little triumvirate Disra had formed was about to blow up in their faces. Flim might look like Thrawn, but he had all the technical genius of a garbage pit parasite. Tierce, a former stormtrooper and royal guardsman under Emperor Palpatine, was the military brains of the little group. And if Captain Dorja saw an allegedly lowly major rush over to the allegedly brilliant Grand Admiral to give him advice, this whole illusion would explode into subscum. Whatever bluff Tierce was running here, it had better work. Transmission from the surface, Admiral, the comm officer called for the portside crew grid. It's Lord Superior Bomshi, Chief of the Unified Factions. On speaker, Lieutenant, Thrawn said. Lord Superior Bomshi, this is Grand Admiral Thrawn. I received your message. What may I do for you? Disra frowned at Tierce. They called us? He muttered. Tierce nodded, a small but satisfied smile playing around his lips. Shh, he said. Listen. We offer you greetings, Grand Admiral Thrawn, a nasally alien voice boomed over the comm. And we congratulate you most heartily on your triumphal return. Thank you, Thrawn said smoothly. As I recall, you were somewhat less enthusiastic at our last meeting. Disra threw Tierce a sharp look. During his sweep through this sector 10 years ago, Tierce muttered. Don't worry, he knows all about it. The alien gave a blubbering laugh. Ah, yes, you remember most clearly, he admitted cheerfully. At that time, the fear of imperial power and the lure of promised freedom still held sway over us. Such lies held sway over many, Thrawn agreed. Does your choice of words imply the Croctari have come to a new understanding? There was a disgusting, wheezy-sounding noise from the comm. We have seen the crumbling of the promise, the Lord Superior said regretfully. There is no longer any order emanating from Coruscant. No focused goals, no clear structures, no discipline. 1,000 different alien species tug the galaxy in 1,000 different directions. Inevitably, Thrawn said. That was why Emperor Palpatine first inaugurated the New Order. It was an attempt to reverse the collapse you now see coming. Yet we were also warned not to trust Imperial promises, Bamishi hedged. The history of the Empire is one of brutal subjugation of non-human species. You speak of the rule of Palpatine, Thrawn said. The Empire has freed itself from his self-destructive anti-alien bias. Your presence in place of command is some evidence of that, Bushmi said cautiously. Still, others still must say the bias exists. Others still lie about the Empire in many ways, Thrawn countered. But there's no need for you to take my word for it. Speak to any of the 15 alien species currently living under Imperial rule, beings who cherish the protection and stability we offer. Yes, protection. The Lord Superior seemed to pounce on the word. The Empire is said to be weak, yet I perceive that you still have great strength. What guarantee of safety do you offer your member systems? The best guarantee in the galaxy, Thrawn said, and even Disra felt a shiver run through him at the veiled power and menace that was subtly in the con man's face. My personal promise of vengeance should anyone dare attack you. There was a noise that sounded midway between a swallow and a burp. I see, Busby he said soberly. I understand that this is rather sudden, and for this I apologize, but on behalf of the unified factions of the Kroktari people, I would like to petition you for readmission into the Empire. Disra looked at Tears, feeling his jaw drop a few millimeters. Readmission? He hissed. Tears smiled back. Surprise, Your Excellency. On behalf of the Empire, I accept your petition, Thrawn said. You no doubt have a delegation standing ready to discuss the details. You understand my people well, Grand Admiral Thrawn, the Lord Superior said wryly. Yes, my delegate does indeed await your pleasure. Then you may signal them to approach, Thrawn told him. As it happens, Imperial Moff Disra is currently aboard the Relentless. As he is a specialist in political matters, he will handle the negotiations. We will be honored to meet with him, Busmi, he said, though I doubt his presence there is in any way the coincidence you imply. Thank you, Grand Admiral Thrawn. And until the meeting. Until the meeting, Lord Superior Busmi, Thrawn said. He gestured to the crew pit. Transmission ended, Admiral, the comm officer confirmed. Thank you, Thrawn said, rising almost leisurely from his command chair. Signal TIE interceptors to stand ready for escort duty. They're to meet the Lord Superior's shuttle as soon as it clears atmosphere, flying in full honor formation. Captain Dorje, I'd like you to meet the shuttle personally and escort the delegation to Conference Room 68. Moff Disra will await you there. Understood, Admiral, Dorje said. He strode from the bridge, throwing Disra a tightly satisfied smile as he passed, and stepped into a waiting turbolift in the aft bridge. You might have said something, Disra muttered to Tierce as the turbolift door closed behind the captain. The guardsman shrugged, a microscopic movement of the shoulders. I wasn't absolutely sure that this was what they wanted when they called, he said, gesturing Disra through the aft doors towards another turbolift. But it seemed like a good guess. Kroktar has several potentially dangerous neighbors, and intelligence reports the unified factions have become extremely disillusioned by Coruscant's inability to decide how tight a restraining bolt they want to keep on intersystem fighting. They reached the turbolift and stepped into a waiting car. Kroktar's the first, Tierce continued, as the doors closed and they began to move. But it won't be the last. We already have transmissions from 20 other systems whose governments would like Grand Admiral Thrawn to drop in for a chat. Disra snorted. All they're trying to do is shake up their enemies. Probably, Tierce agreed. But what do we care why they want to rejoin? The point is that they do, and it's going to send shockwaves from here to Coruscant. Until Coruscant decides to take action. What action can they take? Tierce countered. Their own charter specifically allows member systems to withdraw any time they choose. There was a beep from the turbolift comlink. Moff Disra? Yes? There's a transmission coming in for you, Your Excellency, under a private encryption designated USK-51. Disra felt his stomach try to cramp. Of all the stupid, brainless... Thank you, he said as calmly as he could manage. Have it transferred to conference room 68, and make sure it's not monitored. Yes, Your Excellency. Tierce was frowning at him. That's not. It certainly is, Disra bit out. The turbolift doors opened. Come on, and stay out of sight. 2 minutes later, they were in the conference room with the door of privacy sealed behind them. Activating the comm display set into the center of the table, Disra pulled the proper encryption data card from his collection and slid it into the slot. He keyed for reception. It's about time, Captain Zothop spat, his eyes flashing, his bushy blond beard bristling with anger. Don't you think I've got better things to do than. What? Disra barked. Zothop's head jerked back, his own tirade breaking off midway in sudden confusion. Do you think you're doing? Disra continued into the silence, biting out each word like the crack of a rotten snapstick. How dare you take such an insane risk? Never mind your precious image, Zothop growled, some of his insolence starting to come back. If consorting with pirates is suddenly an embarrassment for you. Embarrassment is not the issue here, Disra said icily. I'm thinking about our 2 necks and whether we get to keep them. Or hadn't you noticed how many relays there are in this transmission? No kidding, Zothop said with a sniff. And here I thought I was just your wonderful Imperial comm equipment kicking ions again. So where are you? Out on your vacation home counting your money? Hardly, Disra said. I'm aboard an Imperial Star Destroyer. Zothop's face seemed to darken. If that's supposed to impress me, you'd better try again. I've about had my fill of your precious Star Destroyers. Really? Disra smiled coldly. Let me guess. You got overconfident, went in blazing, and Admiral Pelion clipped your tail feathers for you. Don't mock me, Disra, Zothop warned. Don't ever mock me. I lost a Kaloth battlecruiser and 800 good men to that Vader-ripped Kochny, and the payment's going to come out of somebody's hide. Pelion's or yours? Don't be absurd, Disra said scornfully. And don't try to blame it on me. I warned you not to actually engage the Chimera. All you were supposed to do was make him think Bilibliss was attacking. And how did you expect I was supposed to do that? Zothop shot back. Insult his family? Transmit lists of ancient Corellian curses? You pushed an Imperial too hard, and he pushed back, Disra said. Consider it a useful lesson painfully learned, and hope you don't need to learn it again. Zothop glared. Is that a threat? He demanded. It's a warning, Disra snapped. Our partnership's been extremely profitable for both of us. I've had the chance to play havoc with New Republic shipping. You've had the chance to collect the merchandise from those ships. And have taken all the risks, Zothop put in. Disra shrugged. Regardless, I'd hate to see such a valuable relationship dissolve over something this trivial. Trust me, Disra, Zothop said softly. When our relationship dissolves, you'll find a lot more than that for you to hate. I'll start making a list, Disra said. Now go lace your wounds, and next time you want to talk to me, go through proper channels. This encrypt's one of the best ever created, but nothing's totally slice-proof. The encrypt's that good, huh? Zothop said sardonically. I'll have to remember that. Should bring a good price on the open market if I ever need quick money. I'll be in touch. He waved a hand off screen and the display blanked. Idiot, Disra snarled towards the empty display. Moronic, brain-rotted idiot. Across the table, Tierce stirred. I trust you're planning to be a little more politic than that with the Crotari, he said. Disra shifted his glare from the display to the guardsman. What? You think I should have let him cry on my shoulder? Or said, there, and promised to buy him a new battlecruiser? The Gavirhu pirates would be a dangerous enemy, Tierce warned. Not militarily, of course, but because of what they know about you. Zothop's the only one who really knows anything, Disra muttered. Tyr's was right. He probably should have played it a little more calmly. But Zothop still shouldn't have contacted him directly like that, especially not when he was away from the security of his office. Regardless, he wasn't going to admit an error in judgment in Tyr's presence. Don't worry. He's making too much out of this arrangement to toss it all over a single battlecruiser. I wonder, Tyr said thoughtfully. You should never underestimate what people will do out of pride. No, Disra said significantly. Or out of arrogance, either. Tyr's eyes narrowed fractionally. What's that supposed to mean? It means you pushed things too far, Disra said flatly. Dangerously far. In case you've forgotten, Flim's job was to inspire the Empire's military and bring them solidly into line behind us. It was never part of the plan to openly provoke the New Republic this way. I've already explained Coruscant has no legal basis for action. And you think that will stop them? Disra shot back. You really think fine points of the law will make any difference to terrified aliens who think Grand Admiral Thrawn is breathing down their necks? Bad enough that you talked me into letting Flim show himself to the Diamolan senator, but now this? He waved a hand in the direction of the planet. The Diamolan incident accomplished exactly what it was intended to, Tyr said coolly. It created doubt and consternation, stirred up old animosities a bit more, and silenced some of the last calming voices the rebellion still has. Wonderful. Except that now this little trick has completely negated that one, Disra countered. How can anyone wonder if the Diamala are lying when a whole planet has seen Thrawn? Tyr smiled. Ah, but that's the point. The whole planet hasn't seen him. Only the Lord Superior's hand-picked delegation will have seen him. The rest have only their word that Thrawn has returned. And since part of his message to the neighboring systems will be that the Kroktar is under Thrawn's protection, his sighting will be as suspect as the Diamals. You always make it sound so reasonable, Disra bit out. But there's more here than you're letting on. I want to know what. Tyr's lifted his eyebrows. That sounded like a threat. It was half a threat, Disra corrected him coldly. Here's the other half. Reaching into his tunic, he drew the tiny blaster concealed there. He never even got a chance to aim it. Before the weapon was even clear, Tyr's had thrown himself onto the conference table, the momentum of his leap carrying him sliding headfirst on elbow and hip towards Disra across the polished laminate. Reflexively, Disra leapt to his right, trying to move out of reach of the approaching hands, but even as he lifted the blaster, Tyr's rolled partway over and grabbed the center comm display, using it as a pivot point to both change direction and also roll him onto his back, swiveling his feet around in front of him and then pushing off of it to increase his speed. The maneuver caught Disra flat-footed. Before he could move again to correct his aim, one of Tyr's feet caught the blaster squarely across the side of the barrel, sending it spinning across the room. Disra took a staggering step back, the bitter taste of defeat choking his throat, hands lifted in a futile gesture of defense as Tyr's hopped off the table. He'd had one chance to wrest control of this grand scheme back from the guardsmen, and he'd muffed it. And now, Tyr's would kill him. But once again, Tyr's surprised him. That was extremely foolish, Your Excellency, the other said calmly, crossing the room and retrieving the blaster. The sound of a shot would have hit a squad of stormtroopers down on you and nothing flat. Disra took a careful breath, lowering his hands. That works both ways, he managed, knowing even as he said it that the guardsman wouldn't need to bother with anything so crude and noisy as a blaster if he wanted to kill him. But Tyr's merely shook his head. You insist on misunderstanding, he said. And you insist on working behind my back, Disra countered. Gaining a system or two isn't worth the risk of scaring Coruscant into action. What's going on that you aren't telling me? Tyr seemed to measure him with his eyes. All right, he said. Have you ever heard the phrase, the hand of Thrawn? Disra shook his head. No. You answered that rather quickly. I was working on this plan long before you came on the scene, Disra reminded him tartly. I found and read everything in the Imperial records that pertained even remotely to Thrawn, including everything in the Emperor's secret files. Once I was able to find a way into them, yes. Disra frowned as a sudden thought struck him. Is that what your little trip to Yaga Minor last month was really all about? Tyr shrugged. The primary purpose was exactly as we discussed, to alter their copy of the Kamas document to match the changes you'd already made in the Bastion copy. But as long as I'd broken into the system anyway, I did spend some time looking for references. Of course, Disra said. Nothing so crude as a direct lie, simply a conveniently neglected bit of the truth. And? Tyr shook his head. Nothing. As far as any existing Imperial record is concerned, the term might not even exist. What makes you think it ever did? Tyr's looked him straight in the eye. Because I heard Thrawn mention it once aboard the Chimera, in the context of the Empire's ultimate and total victory. Suddenly the room felt very cold. You mean like a superweapon? Disra asked carefully. Another Death Star or Sun Crusher? I don't know, Tyr said. I don't think so. Superweapons were more the Emperor or Grand sorry, let me try that again. I don't know, Tyr said. I don't think so. Superweapons were more the Emperor's or Admiral Dalla's style, not Thrawn's. And he just fine without them, Disra conceded. Come to think of it, he did always seem more interested in conquest than wholesale slaughter. Besides, if there were another superweapon lying around, the rebels would almost certainly have found it by now. Most likely, Tyr said. Unfortunately, we can't make it quite that final. Did your extensive research into Thrawn's history happen to turn up the names Park and Neres? Park was the Imperial captain who found Thrawn on a deserted planet at the edge of unknown space and brought him back to the Emperor, Disra said. Neres was the captain of the Imperial Star Destroyer and Monitor, which Thrawn took back into the unknown regions on his supposed mapping expedition a few years later. Supposed? Disra sniffed. It doesn't take much reading between the lines to see that Thrawn tried his hand at Imperial court politics and got his fingers burned. No matter what they called it, his assignment to the unknown regions was a form of exile, pure and simple. Yes, that was the general consensus among the Royal Guard at the time, too, Tyr said thoughtfully. I wonder now if there could have been more to it than that. Regardless, the point is that neither Park nor Neres, nor the Admonitor for that matter, ever returned to official duty with the Empire, not even when Thrawn himself came back. Disra shrugged. Killed in action? Or else they did come back but are hiding elsewhere, Tyr said. Perhaps standing guard over this Hand of Thrawn. Which is what? Disra demanded. You say it's not a superweapon, so what is it? I didn't say it wasn't a superweapon, Tyr countered. I just said superweapons weren't Thrawn's style. Personally, I see only two likely possibilities. Did you ever hear of a woman named Mara Jade? Disra searched his memory. I don't think so. She currently works with the smuggling chief Talon Card, Tyr said. But at the height of the Empire, she was one of Palpatine's best undercover agents, with the title of Emperor's Hand. Emperor's Hand, the Hand of Thrawn. Interesting possibility, Disra said thoughtfully. But if the Hand is a person, where has he or she been all these years? Gone to ground too, perhaps, Tyr said. The second possibility is even more intriguing. Remember that above all else, Thrawn was a master strategist. What could be more his style than to leave behind a master plan for victory? Disra snorted, which after 10 years of Imperial reverses would be totally useless. I wouldn't dismiss it quite so quickly, Tyr's warned. A strategist like Thrawn didn't see battle plans solely in terms of number of warships and locations of picket lines. He also considered geopolitical balances, cultural and psychological blind spots, historical animosities and rivalries, any number of factors which could very likely still be exploited. Absently, Disra rubbed his hand where Tirsa's kick had jammed the blaster painfully against the skin. On the face of it, it was absurd. And yet, he'd read the history of Thrawn's accomplishments, had seen the record of the man's genius. Could he really have created a battle plan that could still be used 10 years and 1,000 defeats later? What about the 5-year campaign I found in his files? He asked. Was there something in there I missed? No. Tyr shook his head. I've already been through it. All that is a rough outline of what he was planning to do after the Bilbringi confrontation. If the Hand of Thrawn is a master strategy, he hid it away somewhere else. With Captain Nereus in the Admonitor, you think? Disra suggested. Perhaps, Tyr said. Or else the ultimate victory lies with a person called the Hand. Either way, there's someone out there who has something we want. Disra smiled tightly. Suddenly it was clear as polished transparent steel. And so in order to lure that someone into the open, you've decided to parade our decoy around a little. Tierce inclined his head slightly. Under the circumstances, I think the risks are worth taking. Perhaps, Disra murmured. It assumes, of course, that it wasn't all just a load of tall talk. The corner of Tierce's lip twitched. I was aboard the Chimera with the Grand Admiral for several months, Disra. Before that, I watched him from the Emperor's side for nearly 2 years. Never in all that time did I hear him make a promise he wasn't able to carry out. If he said the Hand of Thrawn was the key to ultimate victory, then it was. You can count on it. Let's just hope that whoever's holding the key comes out of hiding before Coruscant gets nervous enough to take action, Disra said. What do we do first? What you do first is get ready to welcome the Krotari back into the Empire, Tyr said. Placing Disra's blaster on the table, he pulled a data card from his tunic and set it down beside the weapon. Here's a brief rundown on the species in general and Lord Superior Bosmehi in particular, he continued, starting towards the door. It's all the data we had on board, I'm afraid. It'll do, Disra said, stepping to the table and picking up the card. Where are you going? I thought I'd join Captain Dorja in escorting the delegation from the hangar bay, Tyr said. I'm rather looking forward to seeing your negotiation skills in action. Without waiting for a reply, he stepped through the door and was gone. And to seeing whether or not the Royal Guardsman and conman still need the Moff, Disra muttered aloud after him. Probably, but that was all right. Let him watch. Let Flim watch, too, if he liked. He'd show them. By the time the Krotarian delegation went home, both of them would be absolutely convinced that Disra wasn't just some tired old politician whose brilliant scheme had somehow gotten away from him. He was a vital part of this triumvirate, a part that was not going to simply fade into the background, especially not with a guarantee of ultimate victory almost within their grasp. He had started this, and by the Emperor's blood, he would be with it to the very end. Sliding the data card into his datapad, he tucked his blaster away into its hidden holster and began to read. There were no planets visible from the bridge of the Imperial Star Destroyer Tyrannic. No planets, no asteroids, no ships, no stars. Nothing but complete, uniform blackness. Except for one spot. Off to starboard, barely visible within Captain Nalgol's view, was a small disk of dirty white. A tiny sliver of the comet head the Tyrannic was riding beside, peeking through the ship's cloaking shield. They'd been flying like this for a month now, completely blind and deaf to the rest of the universe outside their insular existence. For Nalgol, it wasn't really a problem. He'd pulled duty as on one of the Empire's most distant listening posts when he was a cadet, and the mere fact that there was nothing outside to look at didn't bother him. But not all of the crew were as tough as he was. The vids and combat practice rooms were getting triple duty these days, and he'd heard rumors that some of the old probe ship pilots were being offered huge bribes to take a passenger or two on their trips outside the darkness. At the height of the Empire's power, Star Destroyer crews had been the elite of the galaxy, but that glory was far behind them, and if something didn't break soon, Nalgol was going to have a serious personnel problem on his hands. Outside, there was a brilliant flash for the upper portside quadrant. Relatively brilliant, at least. The glowing drive from one of their probe ships carefully made it up to look like a battered old mining tug. Nalgol watched as it circled around to vanish beneath the arrowhead-shaped hull towards the hangar bay. No, the unremitting blackness didn't bother him. Still, he had to admit it had felt good to stretch his eyes there for a moment. There was a step on the command walkway beside him. "Preliminary report from Probe 2, sir," Intelligence Chief Ossian said in that tone of voice that always sounded to Nalgol like someone smacking his lips. "The warship count around Bathawui has gone up to 56. 56, Nalgol echoed, taking the other's datapad and skimming the numbers. If he remembered the list from yesterday's probe run. 4 new Diamolan ships. 3 Diamolan, 1 Mon Calamari, Ossian said. Probably there to counter the 6 Octpiece ships that arrived 2 days ago. Nalgol shook his head in wordless amazement. From the beginning, he'd had a quiet but serious doubt about this mission. The idea that the Bothan homeworld would become a focal point for any military activity, let alone a confrontation of this magnitude, had been ludicrous on the face of it. But Grand Admiral Thrawn himself had apparently come up with the scheme, and plagued if old Red Eyes hadn't been right. "Very good," he told Ossian. "I want Probe 2's complete report filed within the next 2 hours." "Understood, Captain." Ossian seemed to hesitate. "I don't mean to pry into top-level affairs, sir, but at some point I'm going to need to know what's going on out here if I'm to do my job properly." "I wish I could help you, Colonel," Nalgol said candidly, "but I really don't know a lot myself." "But you did receive a special briefing from Grand Admiral Thrawn at Moff Disra's palace, didn't you?" the other persisted. "It hardly qualified as a briefing," Nalgol said. "He basically just gave us our assignments and told us to trust him." He nodded in the direction of the Comet and the other 2 Star Destroyers riding cloaked alongside it. "Our part is simple. We waited till all those ships out there had battered themselves and the planet into as much rubble as they're going to. Then we come out of cloak and finish them off." "Finishing off Bathawui will be a good trick," Ossian commented dryly. "I doubt the Bothans have scrimped on their planetary shield system. Thrawn give any idea how he's going to handle that?" "Not to me," Nalgol said. "Under the circumstances, though, I'm inclined to assume he knows what he's doing." "I suppose," Ossian muttered. "I wonder how he got all those ships to face off like that." "Best guess is that rumor you picked up from your fringe contacts just before we cloaked," Nalgol said. "That thing about a group of Bothans having been involved in the destruction of Kamas." "Hardly seems something worth getting worked up over," Ossian sniffed. "Especially not after all this time." "Aliens get worked up over the strangest things," Nalgol reminded him, feeling his lip twist with contempt. "And from the evidence out there, I'd say Thrawn found exactly the right hotspot to hit them with." "So it would seem," Ossian conceded. "How are we supposed to know when to come out of the cloak and attack?" "I think a full-scale battle out there will be fairly obvious," Nalgol said dryly. "Anyway, Thrawn's last message before we went under the cloaks said that there would be an Imperial strike team on Bathawui soon, and that they'd be feeding us periodic data via spark transmission." "That'll be useful," Ossian said thoughtfully. "Of course, knowing Thrawn, he'll probably have the battle timed for the comet's closest approach to Bathawui to give us the maximum benefit of surprise. That's about a month away." "That makes sense," Nalgol agreed, "though how he's going to get them to follow that tight a timetable, I haven't a clue." "Neither do I." Ossian smiled tightly. "That's probably why he's a Grand Admiral and we're not." Nalgol smiled back. "Indeed," he said, and with that admission, one more layer of his private doubts seemed to melt away. Yes, Thrawn had proved himself in the past. Many, many times. However, this magic of his worked. It was apparently still working. And under the spell of Thrawn's genius, the Empire was about to get some of its own back. And that was really all Nalgal cared about. Thank you, Colonel, he said, handing back the other's datapad. You may return to your duties. Before you do, though, I want you to check with probe control about whether we can increase our probe flights to twice a day without drawing unwanted attention. Yes, sir, Oyson said, with another tight smile. After all, we wouldn't want to miss out on our grand entrance. Nalgal turned to gaze out at the blackness again. We won't miss it, he promised softly. Not a chance. And that's the end of the chapter. Hope you enjoyed it. Talk to you soon.